The sleepy streets of Muskogee County, Georgia, hide more than just southern charm beneath their sprawling oak trees. First Baptist Church stands tall against the blue sky, its white steeple a beacon of faith for generations of families who've gathered there every Sunday. But on a crisp autumn morning in 2013, this sacred ground became something else entirely, a murder scene that would haunt this community for a decade. Behind that cherished church, 28-year-old Anna Thompson took her final breath, her life violently stolen in a place meant for peace and salvation. The brutal murder shocked the tight-knit community to its core. Parents kept their children closer. Neighbors eyed each other with newfound suspicion. And somewhere, blending into the fabric of everyday life, a killer walked free. For 10 years, this murderer shopped at the same grocery stores, attended the same town events, perhaps even mourned alongside Anna's devastated family. For 10 long years, justice remained elusive as the case grew colder with each passing season. But some secrets refused to stay buried forever. What happens when advanced DNA technology finally pierces the veil of a seemingly perfect small town? When the truth reveals that evil wore the most ordinary face of all? If you're fascinated by how modern forensic techniques are solving decades-old mysteries, hit subscribe now and turn on notifications. This channel brings you the most compelling cold cases finally brought to justice. Because time may pass, but the truth always finds its way to the light. I'm curious. Where are you watching this video from today? Drop your location in the comments below. Are you from a small town like Muskogee County, or somewhere completely different? Let me know. Muskogee County sits in western Georgia, straddling the Chattahoochee River along the Alabama border. Columbus serves as its beating heart, a city large enough to matter on maps but small enough that connections run deep and reputations last lifetimes. It's the kind of place where family names carry weight, where people still wave to passing cars, and where everyone seems connected by no more than 2 degrees of separation. Beyond Columbus's modest skyline, the county unfurls into a patchwork of rural communities, places where neighbors don't just know your name, but your grandmother's maiden name too. These are towns where Friday night football games are community events, where local diners serve as unofficial town halls, and where church attendance is less a religious obligation and more a cornerstone of social identity. In one such community, First Baptist Church stands as more than just a house of worship. Built in 1943, its white clapboard exterior and red brick foundation have weathered decades of Georgia summers and southern storms. The church hosts everything from Sunday services to wedding receptions, from community fundraisers to grief counseling. Its fellowship hall has witnessed first steps, first dances, and final goodbyes. For generations, the church has been both sanctuary and social center, a place where faith and community are so tightly interwoven, they become indistinguishable. Anna Thompson understood this intricate social tapestry better than most. Born and raised in Muskogee County, the 28-year-old embodied the best of small-town sensibilities with big-world aspirations. After graduating from Columbus State University with a degree in elementary education, Anna returned home rather than seeking opportunities in Atlanta or beyond. "These are my people," she once told her college roommate. "I want to give back to the community that raised me." As a third-grade teacher at Northside Elementary, Anna quickly became a favorite among students and parents alike. Her classroom was a kaleidoscope of creativity, walls covered with student artwork, bookshelves overflowing with dog-eared favorites, and a reading corner with pillows she'd sewn herself. Colleagues described her as sunshine in human form, quick to laugh, eager to help, and endlessly patient with even the most challenging students. Beyond the classroom, Anna volunteered at the local animal shelter, sang in First Baptist's choir, and coached girls' youth soccer. Her dating life had seen a few serious relationships come and go, but friends noted she seemed content with her independence, focused more on building her career and community connections than finding a partner. Her mother would later tell investigators that Anna had recently mentioned feeling ready to open that chapter of her life again, a chance she would never get. October 17, 2013, began as an ordinary Thursday. Security cameras from Northside Elementary captured Anna arriving at 7:15 a.m., travel mug in hand, greeting students by name as they filed off buses. Throughout the day, she taught her planned lessons, attended a brief faculty meeting during lunch, and stayed after school until 4:30 p.m. to prepare for the following day's science experiment. Cell phone records show Anna called her mother at 4:43 p.m. while driving home, a conversation lasting 12 minutes, where they discussed weekend plans for their monthly mother-daughter dinner. At 5:22 p.m., Anna's credit card was used at Murphy's gas station on Veterans Parkway, purchasing $32.17 of fuel and a Diet Coke. What happened next remains partially reconstructed through witness statements and electronic footprints. Anna's fitness tracker recorded her taking a walk beginning at 6:35 p.m., a routine evening activity for her. The path she chose that evening took her through her subdivision and toward First Baptist Church, where she frequently stopped to sit on a bench in the small prayer garden behind the building. Her last text message, sent to her brother at 7:11 p.m., read simply, "Beautiful sunset tonight, taking the long way home." By 9:30 p.m., when Anna hadn't returned home and wasn't answering calls or texts, her roommate began to worry. By midnight, family members had already begun searching the walking paths Anna frequently used, and by dawn, the entire community would be mobilized in a desperate search that would end behind First Baptist Church, where Anna Thompson's final moments had played out in violent contrast to the sacred ground where her body was discovered. The morning of October 18th dawned with an eerie quietness over Muscogee County. Anna Thompson hadn't returned home, and her phone went straight to voicemail. By 6:30 a.m., a formal search party had assembled at the local community center. Teachers from Northside Elementary, members of First Baptist, neighbors, friends, and a growing contingent of concerned citizens who only knew Anna by reputation. Deacon Robert Miller arrived at First Baptist Church at 7:15 a.m. to unlock the building for the prayer group that gathered every Friday morning. He noticed something unusual behind the church, a single woman's shoe on the path leading to the prayer garden. His initial thought was that someone had dropped it during yesterday's youth group meeting, but something about the lone shoe struck him as out of place. Following what he would later describe as a terrible feeling in my gut, he walked toward the garden. What he discovered changed Muscogee County forever. Anna Thompson lay partially concealed behind the large azalea bushes that bordered the prayer garden. The 911 call, placed at 7:23 a.m., captured Robert's anguished voice. "I found her. Oh Lord, I found Anna. Please send help. She's not alive." Within minutes, the peaceful church grounds transformed into a frenetic crime scene. Yellow police tape cordoned off the entire back half of the property. Detectives, evidence technicians, and the county medical examiner converged on the scene. The preliminary assessment revealed Anna had been strangled, with defensive wounds suggesting she had fought desperately for her life. Her fitness tracker had been smashed, stopped permanently at 7:38 p.m., marking the likely time of her murder. The location itself added a disturbing dimension to the crime. The prayer garden, with its semicircle of benches facing a small stone fountain, had been designed as a place of reflection and peace. Now it stood as a stark reminder that safety was an illusion. More troubling to investigators, the position of Anna's body suggested she had been deliberately placed rather than killed in a struggle, indicating premeditation rather than a random act of violence. As news spread through the county, the community's reaction unfolded in waves of disbelief, horror, and grief. Parents rushed to schools to pick up their children, despite assurances from authorities that this appeared to be an isolated incident. Local businesses closed early out of respect. First Baptist canceled all activities for the week. Within hours, a spontaneous memorial of flowers, candles, and handwritten notes began to grow at the church entrance. For Anna's family, the news shattered their world beyond recognition. Her mother collapsed upon hearing the confirmation and had to be sedated by medical personnel. Her father, typically stoic and reserved, broke down during the initial police interview, unable to comprehend how anyone could harm his daughter. Her younger brother took on the grim responsibility of identifying her body, a moment that would haunt him for years to come. Anna's colleagues at Northside Elementary faced the impossible task of explaining to third graders why their beloved teacher wouldn't be returning. One fellow teacher recalled, "How do you tell children that kind of truth?" We ended up saying she had gone to heaven suddenly, and 22 8-year-olds made her cards anyway, thinking somehow she'd receive them. In the days that followed, trauma counselors were brought into schools, churches held vigils, and the community established a scholarship fund in Anna's name. Local news coverage, initially sensationalized, softened as reporters recognized they were covering the death of someone many of them personally knew. Sheriff Daniel Blackwood, a 30-year veteran of law enforcement, addressed the community 3 days after the murder. "In all my years serving this county, I've never seen such senseless violence touch our community so deeply. I make this promise to Anna's family and to all of you. We will not rest until the person responsible faces justice." It was a promise that would take 10 long years to fulfill. The Muscogee County Sheriff's Department sprang into action with a level of resources rarely deployed in the rural jurisdiction. Sheriff Blackwood assembled a task force comprising his most experienced detectives, supplemented by forensic specialists from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Within hours of discovering Anna's body, investigators had established a command center in the church's fellowship hall, a space normally used for potluck dinners, now transformed by evidence boards, computer stations, and the grim determination of law enforcement. "The first 48 hours are critical in any homicide investigation," explained Detective Marcus Reynolds, the lead investigator assigned to the case. "We treat every homicide with the utmost seriousness, but when it's someone like Anna, a teacher, a volunteer, someone who gave so much to this community, there's an added pressure to get it right." The initial evidence collection yielded promising leads. Anna's fingernails contained skin cells, suggesting she had scratched her attacker during the struggle. Partial shoe prints in the soft soil behind the azalea bushes indicated a men's size 11 athletic shoe with a distinctive tread pattern. Surveillance footage from businesses along Veterans Parkway captured Anna's car passing at 6:29 p.m., consistent with the beginning of her walk registered on her fitness tracker. Perhaps most significant was DNA evidence recovered from the scene that didn't match Anna, potential biological material from her killer. Yet challenges mounted almost immediately. The prayer garden, while secluded, was accessible from multiple directions with no security cameras covering the area. The October evening had brought a light rain shortly after the estimated time of death, potentially washing away trace evidence. And in a devastating blow to investigators, the DNA sample collected was minimal and degraded, insufficient for complete profiling with 2013's technology. The investigation initially focused on Anna's personal connections. Detectives interviewed her ex-boyfriends, colleagues, and even students' parents who might have had concerning interactions with her. Her cell phone records and social media accounts were meticulously examined for any indication of stalking or threats. Friends and family were questioned about whether Anna had mentioned feeling afraid or noticing anyone unusual paying attention to her. One by one, potential suspects were cleared. Her most recent ex-boyfriend had an airtight alibi. He was on a business trip in Phoenix, confirmed by hotel security footage and multiple witnesses. A parent who had angrily confronted Anna about his son's failing grade was coaching youth basketball at the YMCA during the time of the murder, surrounded by dozens of witnesses. A fellow teacher who had reportedly expressed romantic interest in Anna was having dinner with his elderly mother at a local restaurant, verified by both credit card records and security cameras. As weeks stretched into months, the investigation began to lose momentum. The task force shrank as officers were reassigned to new cases. Media coverage, initially intense, dwindled to occasional updates. The reward for information, which had grown to $75,000 through community donations, generated dozens of tips, but nothing substantive. By the 6-month mark, Detective Reynolds found himself increasingly isolated in his dedication to the case. "We had a murder board that took up an entire wall," he later recalled. "Hundreds of interviews, dozens of potential suspects, mountains of forensic reports, and not a single solid lead that stood up to scrutiny." The Thompson family watched with growing despair as the case that had once commanded the full attention of local law enforcement gradually slipped into the background. Anna's mother began calling the sheriff's office weekly, then monthly, asking for updates that became increasingly sparse. On the one-year anniversary of Anna's death, Sheriff Blackwood made a public statement that struck a somber note in the community. The investigation into Anna Thompson's murder remains active, but I must be honest with our citizens. We have exhausted our current leads. We're now dependent on new information coming to light or someone coming forward with what they know. It was, without explicitly saying so, an admission that the case had gone cold. The file wasn't closed, it never would be for a homicide, but the daily pursuit of Anna's killer had given way to occasional review and the distant hope of a breakthrough. For the Thompson family and the community that had rallied around them, this was perhaps the cruelest development of all. Not a resolution, but a lingering wound that refused to heal. In the absence of justice, there could be no closure, only the haunting knowledge that someone had gotten away with murder. What time is it where you're watching? Drop it in the comments below. Are you a night owl solving mysteries with me in the dark, or catching this during your lunch break? Let me know. Time marches forward relentlessly, even when justice stands still. As months turned to years, Muskogee County struggled to reconcile with the unsolved murder in their midst. The yellow crime scene tape had long been removed from behind First Baptist Church, the prayer garden restored and rededicated, but an invisible boundary remained. Parents no longer allowed their children to walk alone at dusk. Women carried pepper spray on evening jogs. Neighbors installed security cameras and motion sensor lights. It's like we all collectively lost our innocence, explained Reverend James Wilson, who took over as pastor at First Baptist 2 years after the murder. Not just because of what happened to Anna, but because we still don't know who did it. That uncertainty breeds a particular kind of fear, one that changes how people move through the world. Statistics confirmed this shift. Home security system installations in Muskogee County rose 68% in the 5 years following Anna's murder. Neighborhood watch programs tripled. The Parks and Recreation Department reported a steady decline in usage of walking trails and public spaces after dark. Local businesses adjusted their hours, with fewer establishments remaining open into the evening. Yet amid this subtle transformation, the community refused to forget Anna Thompson. Each October 17th, First Baptist Church hosted a memorial service that consistently drew hundreds of attendees even years later. The third-grade classroom at Northside Elementary permanently displayed a portrait of Anna, and the school established an annual Ms. Thompson Kindness Week featuring community service projects inspired by her volunteer work. Anna's parents, Thomas and Catherine Thompson, channeled their grief into advocacy. They established the Anna Thompson Foundation, which funded self-defense classes for women and girls throughout the county. Catherine became a certified victim advocate, supporting other families navigating the aftermath of violent crime. Thomas, a previously private person, began speaking at law enforcement conferences about the importance of cold case units in rural jurisdictions. "I know that whoever took my daughter thinks they've gotten away with it," Catherine told a local newspaper on the 5th anniversary of Anna's death. "But they haven't. They're living with what they did every day, and someday, somehow, the truth will come out. I believe that with my whole heart." Behind the scenes, the Thompson family hired private investigators, consulted with forensic experts, and met quarterly with the sheriff's department to review the case. They maintained a website dedicated to Anna's case, featuring a timeline of events and a tip line that occasionally generated new, if ultimately unfruitful, leads. Detective Reynolds, though reassigned to other cases, kept a copy of Anna's file at his desk. Each year he requested the department's newest detectives review the evidence with fresh eyes. Technological advances occasionally warranted re-examining physical evidence, though these efforts yielded no breakthroughs. As the 5-year mark passed, then 7, then 9, the case retained its power to unsettle the community, but receded from daily conversation. New families moved to Muskogee County unaware of its darkest chapter until neighbors discreetly filled them in. Children who had been in elementary school during the murder graduated high school with only vague memories of community-wide tension. The ordinary business of living continued as it must. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, the mystery remained an unhealed wound in the community's psyche. Longtime residents still pointed out the prayer garden to visitors in hushed tones. Local folklore accumulated around the case, rumors of sightings, conspiracies, and cover-ups that Detective Reynolds regularly debunked. For the Thompson family, the passing years brought an evolution in their grief, but no diminishment of their determination. People expect you to move on after a certain point. Thomas Thompson reflected on the 9th anniversary of his daughter's death. But how do you move on when you don't know who took your child? When they could be standing behind you in line at the grocery store? That's not grief. That's an open wound. Little did he know that within months of speaking those words, everything would change. If this case has captured your attention, hit that like button right now and share this video with someone who appreciates true crime mysteries. Have you followed a cold case that was eventually solved? What breakthroughs led to justice? Comment below. And stay with me. The most shocking developments in Anna's case are just ahead. January 2022 brought a significant development to the Muskogee County Sheriff's Department, the establishment of its first dedicated cold case unit. Sheriff Blackwood, nearing retirement and reflecting on the unresolved cases that defined his career, secured grant funding to create a 2-person team focused exclusively on unsolved homicides. The unit would be led by Detective Leah Martinez, a 15-year veteran who had built a reputation for solving complex cases through methodical analysis and emerging technologies. When they asked which case I wanted to tackle first, there wasn't even a moment of hesitation. Detective Martinez later explained. Anna Thompson's murder had been hanging over this department and this community for nearly a decade. It was time to bring fresh eyes and new techniques to the investigation. Martinez began by completely reorganizing the evidence. Rather than approaching the case chronologically as previous investigators had done, she mapped connections between people, locations, and physical evidence. Her office walls soon displayed an intricate web of relationships and timelines, with Anna at the center. She conducted new interviews with key witnesses, not seeking different information but listening for inconsistencies or details that might have been overlooked. Cold cases aren't usually solved by discovering brand new evidence, Martinez explained. They're solved by recognizing the significance of evidence we've had all along. The most promising avenue, however, lay in scientific advancements that had transformed forensic investigation in the decade since Anna's murder. DNA technology had undergone a revolution, with techniques like massively parallel sequencing and probabilistic genotyping, allowing for analysis of samples previously considered too degraded or limited for testing. In March 2022, Martinez submitted the original DNA evidence collected from beneath Anna's fingernails to a specialized forensic laboratory in Virginia. Unlike conventional DNA analysis, which requires relatively large, uncontaminated samples, this lab specialized in extracting usable genetic profiles from minimal biological material. The science that exists today versus what we had in 2013 is like comparing a smartphone to a telegraph, explained Dr. Elaine Winters, the forensic scientist who processed the evidence. We can now identify individual DNA markers from samples containing just a few cells, and we can separate mixed DNA profiles that would have been impossible to untangle a decade ago. While waiting for these results, Martinez pursued another technological breakthrough: genetic genealogy. This technique, which had gained prominence after identifying the Golden State Killer in 2018, uses DNA profiles to search genealogical databases for potential relatives of an unknown subject. By building family trees and narrowing down possibilities, investigators can identify suspects who never directly submitted their DNA to law enforcement databases. The process was painstaking. The partial DNA profile recovered from Anna's case yielded distant matches at best, requiring Martinez to construct elaborate family trees spanning generations and multiple states. For months, she worked alongside a genetic genealogist, gradually narrowing the field of potential suspects based on age, location, and connection to Muskogee County. By August 2022, they had identified 3 family lines that converged in the area during the relevant time frame. Martinez began the delicate process of elimination, discreetly investigating male members of these families who would have been in the area in 2013. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. In September 2022, the specialized lab returned their analysis of the DNA beneath Anna's fingernails. Using advanced extraction techniques, they had isolated a more complete profile than was previously possible. When this enhanced profile was run through the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, it returned a match, not to a convicted offender, but to evidence from another crime. "I'll never forget that moment," Martinez recalled. "I was staring at the report showing that the DNA under Anna's fingernails matched biological evidence from an attempted sexual assault in Phoenix City, Alabama in 2016, just across the state line from us. A case that had also gone unsolved. The victim in the Alabama case had fought off her attacker, scratching him in the process and providing police with a partial description. Though that case remained unsolved, the attacker's DNA had been preserved in the system. The connection between the 2 crimes provided Martinez with critical new information: physical description, method of attack, and geographic range. When Martinez cross-referenced this information with the family trees developed through genetic genealogy, a single name emerged: Michael Lawson, 48, a delivery driver whose routes regularly took him through both Muscogee County and Phoenix City. More significantly, in 2013, Lawson had served as a volunteer maintenance worker at several local churches, including First Baptist. "Sometimes in detective work, you build a case piece by piece," Martinez said. "Other times, everything aligns at once, and you can almost hear the click as the puzzle pieces lock together. This was definitely the latter." With this connection established, Martinez assembled a surveillance team. Their mission: obtain a discarded item containing Lawson's DNA to confirm the match before making an arrest. The decade-long hunt for Anna Thompson's killer had entered its final phase. To understand how a killer could remain hidden within a close-knit community for a decade, one must first understand the perfect camouflage: ordinariness. The man who took Anna Thompson's life wasn't a drifter passing through town or a notorious criminal. He was, by all outward appearances, unremarkable. Born and raised in a neighboring county, he had moved to the Muscogee area in his late 20s, settling into a modest rental home on the outskirts of Columbus. His employment history showed a pattern of steady, if unambitious work: warehouse positions, delivery routes, maintenance jobs, never rising to management, never staying unemployed long enough to draw attention. His performance reviews described him as reliable, punctual, and keeps to himself, the kind of employee who blends into the background of any workplace. His personal life followed a similar pattern of calculated averageness. Divorced once in his early 30s, he maintained cordial but distant relationships with neighbors. He attended community events occasionally but never took leadership roles. He'd volunteer sporadically, enough to be seen as contributing but never enough to be memorable. No criminal record beyond a decade-old DUI. No history of mental health treatment. No social media presence worth mentioning. Looking back, that's what's most disturbing, Detective Martinez would later observe. He cultivated invisibility, not isolation, that draws attention, but a carefully maintained blandness that made him forgettable. His connection to First Baptist Church began in 2012 when the congregation sought volunteers for maintenance projects. Church records showed he helped repaint classrooms, fix plumbing issues, and maintain the grounds over a 6-month period. He knew the layout of the property intimately, including the secluded prayer garden. More critically, he had observed Anna during choir practice, noting her routine of evening walks. After Anna's murder, he made what investigators would later recognize as calculated moves to avoid suspicion. He expressed appropriate shock in conversations with others, but never inserted himself into the investigation. He attended the first memorial service but skipped subsequent ones. He moved to a different neighborhood within the county 6 months after the murder, not far enough to suggest flight, but sufficient to distance himself from the immediate area, For 10 years, he lived with his secret. He continued working delivery routes that took him through Columbus and into Alabama. He developed a pattern of frequenting bars just across the state line, where his attempted assault in 2016 demonstrated an escalation in boldness, or perhaps desperation. When that attack was thwarted by his victim's resistance, he retreated once more into his carefully constructed ordinary life. The surveillance team assembled by Detective Martinez observed this ordinary existence for 2 weeks. They watched him drive his delivery route, stop for lunch at fast food restaurants, return to his apartment in the evenings. They waited for the perfect opportunity to collect discarded DNA evidence without alerting him to their interest. The opportunity came when he visited a local diner for breakfast. After he left, detectives recovered his used coffee cup and fork. Rush analysis confirmed what Martinez already suspected. His DNA matched both the sample from beneath Anna's fingernails and the evidence from the Alabama assault case. On October 12, 2023, just days before the 10-year anniversary of Anna's murder, Michael Lawson's ordinary day was interrupted as he returned to his delivery truck after a routine stop. 4 unmarked police vehicles surrounded him in the parking lot of a hardware store. Detective Martinez approached with uniformed officers flanking her. "Michael Lawson," she announced, "you're under arrest for the murder of Anna Thompson." Witnesses described his reaction not as explosive or panicked, but as a quiet deflation, as though he had been waiting for this moment for 10 years. He offered no resistance as officers handcuffed him and read his rights. The arrest sent shockwaves through Muskogee County. Local news broke into regular programming with the announcement. Within hours, the sheriff's office held a press conference confirming that an arrest had been made in the decade-old case. Sheriff Blackwood, visibly emotional, credited advances in DNA technology and the tireless work of our cold case unit for the breakthrough. For those who knew Lawson, or thought they did, the news was incomprehensible. Co-workers expressed disbelief. Neighbors struggled to reconcile the quiet man who nodded hello with the monster now revealed. A former supervisor told reporters, "If you'd asked me to list 100 people who might be capable of murder, he wouldn't have made the list." But perhaps most telling was the reaction of Anna's mother, Catherine Thompson, who upon hearing the news simply said, "I've passed him in the grocery store. I've stood behind him in line at the bank. All this time, he was right here." This case raises a haunting question I'd like you to answer in the comments. How many killers might be hiding in plain sight in communities across America right now? Do you believe advances in DNA technology will eventually solve most cold cases, or will some killers always escape justice? If you're finding this case as compelling as I am, take a second to hit that like button. It helps more people discover these important stories. The arrest of Michael Lawson tore through Muskogee County like a sudden storm, leaving a community struggling to process a truth both longed for and dreaded. The man who had taken Anna Thompson's life hadn't been a shadowy outsider, but someone who had moved among them for years. Pumping gas at the same stations, shopping at the same stores, perhaps even exchanging pleasantries with Anna's own family members. Local news stations captured the immediate aftermath as reporters thrust microphones toward stunned residents. "I just can't believe it," said Diane Mercer, who had lived 2 doors down from Lawson for 3 years. "He helped me carry groceries when I broke my ankle last winter. He was so normal." Her voice cracked on the final word, encapsulating the community's collective disorientation. At Lawson's workplace, Columbus Delivery Services, employees gathered in shocked clusters. "He was just here yesterday," one coworker told reporters, his face pale with disbelief. "We ate lunch together at least once a week for 5 years. He talked about sports, complained about traffic, never anything strange or concerning." The manager who had hired Lawson described him as the definition of reliable, never late, never called in sick, never had complaints from customers. When asked if there had been any red flags, he shook his head slowly. "That's what's terrifying. There weren't any. He was just there, doing his job, blending in." For the Thompson family, the arrest brought a complex tangle of emotions. "There's relief, of course," Thomas Thompson told reporters outside the courthouse after Lawson's initial appearance. But there's also this overwhelming anger that he's been free all these years while we've been suffering. He watched us search for answers. He probably saw our pleas on the local news. Catherine Thompson, who had channeled her grief into advocacy work with victims' families, found herself suddenly thrust back into the raw pain of loss. "I thought I was prepared for this moment," she said during a brief statement. "I've imagined it thousands of times, but nothing prepares you for looking into the face of the person who took your child." She paused, visibly collecting herself. "And nothing prepares you for realizing it's a face you've seen before." Anna's brother, who had identified her body a decade earlier, refused to attend the court proceedings. "I don't need to see him," he explained. "I need him to face justice, but I won't give him the satisfaction of my attention." As details of the investigation became public, the community struggled to reconcile the methodical police work with their own failure to recognize a predator in their midst. First Baptist Church, where Lawson had volunteered and later committed murder, held an emergency congregation meeting attended by over 400 people. Reverend Wilson addressed the stunned gathering. "We are confronting not just the identity of Anna's killer, but our own vulnerability. We trusted this person. We welcomed him into our sacred spaces." The church announced plans to completely redesign the prayer garden, transforming it from a site of tragedy to a place of healing and remembrance. They also implemented new security measures and background check requirements for all volunteers, changes that many community organizations quickly adopted as well. Muscogee County officials organized a town hall meeting at the high school gymnasium, where over 1,000 residents gathered to hear from law enforcement, mental health professionals, and victim advocates. Sheriff Blackwood addressed the community's sense of betrayal directly. "Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it wears the face of ordinary life. That's a difficult truth to accept, but accepting it makes us safer, not more afraid." Detective Martinez, speaking publicly about the case for the first time, explained how advances in forensic science had finally brought justice. "DNA doesn't forget, and it doesn't lie," she told the crowd. "No matter how careful someone is, they leave traces of themselves behind." Science caught up to this case, as it's catching up to cold cases across the country. For many in attendance, the most powerful moment came when Catherine Thompson took the microphone. Standing straight-backed despite the weight of a decade's grief, she addressed her neighbors. "10 years ago, I lost faith in justice. Today, I'm beginning to find it again. Anna would want us to remember not how she died, but how to live. With courage, with kindness, and with faith in each other, even when that faith is tested." As she spoke, many in the audience wept openly, not just for Anna, but for the innocence their community had lost and was now struggling to reclaim. The wheels of justice, having been stalled for a decade, now moved with deliberate purpose. Michael Lawson was indicted by a grand jury on charges of first-degree murder, with special circumstances of premeditation and lying in wait. The district attorney's office, aware of the community's intense interest in the case, assigned their most experienced prosecutor, Vanessa Cortez, who had never lost a homicide trial in her 15-year career. "This isn't just about securing a conviction," Cortez explained during a pretrial press conference. "It's about providing answers to a family and a community that have waited far too long. We intend to present a case so thorough and compelling that there can be no doubt about the defendant's guilt." The defense, meanwhile, faced an uphill battle against mounting scientific evidence. Lawson's court-appointed attorney, Martin Geller, a respected veteran of the public defender's office, focused initially on procedural challenges, questioning the chain of custody for decade-old evidence and the constitutionality of genetic genealogy techniques. When these motions were denied, he shifted strategy toward mitigating factors that might spare his client the death penalty. The trial began in April 2024, nearly 11 years after Anna's murder. The Muscogee County Courthouse implemented extraordinary security measures, with attendees passing through multiple checkpoints before entering the courtroom. The proceedings were not televised, but a closed-circuit feed was provided in an overflow room to accommodate the hundreds who sought to witness justice unfold. Prosecutor Cortez opened with a methodical timeline of Anna's final hours, illustrated with maps, phone records, and surveillance footage. She then pivoted to the forensic evidence, calling Dr. Elaine Winters from the specialized DNA laboratory to explain in accessible terms how modern techniques had extracted usable genetic material from samples previously considered too degraded. The DNA profile extracted from beneath Anna Thompson's fingernails matches the defendant's DNA profile with a statistical probability of 1 in 1.2 trillion, Dr. Winters testified. To put that in perspective, that's over 150 times the entire human population of Earth. The prosecution connected this evidence to the attempted assault in Alabama, demonstrating a pattern of behavior and establishing Lawson's presence in both locations. Detective Martinez testified about the investigation, explaining how genetic genealogy had narrowed the field of suspects and ultimately led to Lawson. Perhaps most damning was the testimony from Lawson's former supervisor at First Baptist Church, who confirmed that Lawson had specifically volunteered to maintain the prayer garden area and had been present during choir practices when Anna would have been at the church. Cell phone records placed Lawson's phone near the church on the evening of the murder, contradicting his initial statement to police that he had been home all night. The defense case centered primarily on challenging the reliability of decade-old evidence and suggesting alternative explanations for Lawson's DNA presence. Geller argued that as a maintenance worker at the church, Lawson might have left DNA in areas Anna visited, creating the possibility of transfer. This argument collapsed when the prosecution demonstrated that the DNA was found specifically under Anna's fingernails in a pattern consistent with defensive wounds. After 12 days of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for just 7 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts. The sentencing phase brought emotional impact statements from Anna's family. Her mother spoke directly to Lawson for the first time. "You didn't just take Anna's life. You took her future. You took the children she would have had, the students she would have taught, the difference she would have made in countless lives, and you took our peace for 10 years. Lawson, who had maintained a stoic demeanor throughout the trial, finally addressed the court before sentencing. His statement, brief and halting, offered no explanation for his actions, only an acknowledgement. "I can't undo what I did. I can't give you the why you're looking for. I'm not sure I understand it myself." Judge Eleanor Simmons, before pronouncing sentence, addressed both the defendant and the community. "This case represents both the failure and the triumph of our justice system. The failure that allowed a killer to walk free for a decade, and the triumph of persistence and scientific advancement that finally brought truth to light." She sentenced Michael Lawson to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, adding, "No punishment can restore what was taken from Anna Thompson and her family. But perhaps this verdict can begin to restore this community's faith in justice." As Lawson was led from the courtroom, Catherine Thompson watched silently, her hand gripping her husband's. A chapter closed, but the story of Anna's impact on Muskogee County was far from over. Justice delayed is not always justice denied. The resolution of Anna Thompson's case stands as testament to the persistence of truth, how it waits, sometimes for years, until science, circumstance, and human determination align to bring it into the light. For 10 years, Michael Lawson believed he had escaped accountability for his actions. He moved through life assuming the passage of time had erased his crime. But DNA, that microscopic signature we leave behind with every touch, every struggle, every moment of violence, remained patient, waiting for technology to advance enough to give it voice. Anna's legacy extends far beyond the tragic circumstances of her death. The scholarship established in her name has helped 27 students pursue teaching careers. The self-defense program founded by her parents has trained over 2,000 women and girls. Northside Elementary's annual Kindness Week has expanded to schools throughout the county, inspiring thousands of hours of community service. Anna lived for 28 years and taught for 6. Her mother reflected at a memorial service held after the trial. But her impact will continue for generations. That's something her killer could never take away. The community's healing process continues, transformed by both trauma and resolution. First Baptist Church dedicated its newly redesigned prayer garden on what would have been Anna's 39th birthday, a space now filled with light, visibility, and security features that balance safety with serenity. The church also established an annual lecture series on community safety and violence prevention. Perhaps most significantly, Muscogee County has fundamentally changed how it approaches public safety. The cold case unit that solved Anna's murder has been permanently funded. The Sheriff's Department has implemented new training focused on evidence preservation for future technological advances. Local schools now include age-appropriate safety education alongside traditional subjects. For forensic scientists and law enforcement nationwide, the Thompson case represents the power of technological persistence. Samples once considered too degraded or minimal for testing can now yield crucial evidence. Family trees can be constructed from genetic fragments. Digital breadcrumbs can be followed years after they were left. Cold cases are never truly cold, Detective Martinez explained during a law enforcement conference following the trial. They're waiting for the right combination of technology, methodology, and determination. Every year, we develop new tools that make the unsolvable solvable. Every year, killers who thought they were safe grow less secure. For the Thompson family, no verdict could fully heal their loss. But in the resolution of Anna's case, they found something many families never receive: answers, accountability, and the knowledge that the truth, however delayed, finally came to light. If you've stayed with me through this entire case, you're clearly someone who cares about justice and the stories behind the headlines. Hit subscribe right now and join our community of truth seekers. Next week, we'll examine how a 30-year-old murder in rural Montana was solved through a genealogy website, and one detective's refusal to give up. From cold cases to courtroom drama, this channel brings you the full story behind America's most compelling crimes. Thanks for watching, and remember, no secret stays buried forever.